The scent of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of cheerful conversations filled the air as I arrived at the prestigious private school for my daughter's graduation ceremony. My wife, Monica, had gone ahead to help set up, leaving me to navigate the maze of parking and stiff handshakes from other parents. I adjusted my tie, already feeling the weight of the day. My daughter, Emily, was the reason I endured these formalities. She was my pride, bright, compassionate girl with a sharp wit and an uncanny ability to read people. She was graduating at the top of her class, a feat that felt like my greatest accomplishment as a father. As I approached the school gymnasium, where the event was being held, Monica emerged, her dress flowing elegantly as she carried a tray of refreshments. She waved, her smile picture, perfect as always. To an outsider, we looked like the ideal power couple. Wealthy, successful, and united. Inside, my instincts told me otherwise. Lately, something had been off. Monica's laughter seemed hollow, her touch distant, and her late-night committee meetings stretched far too long. I'd brushed it off as paranoia, the product of too many long work hours and not enough time spent nurturing our marriage. But the nagging doubt gnawed at me. As I helped her unload the tray, she casually mentioned Mr. Donovan, Emily's English teacher. "You should meet him. He's been such an inspiration to Emily," she said, her voice light and practiced. The name hung in the air like a sore note. I'd heard it before, too many times. Emily adored him, but Monica's enthusiasm for the man had begun to feel excessive. My stomach tightened, though I forced a smile. "Maybe later," I said, dismissing it. Inside the gym, rows of chairs were meticulously arranged, and a stage adorned with the school crest stood ready for the ceremony. I found my seat near the front, scanning the crowd. Monica, however, had vanished into the sea of faculty and parents. I glanced at my watch. Still an hour until the event started. "Dad," Emily's voice jolted me back. She appeared, radiant in her cap and gown, her excitement infectious. "Can you believe it? I'm finally done with high school." I hugged her tightly, pushing my knees aside. This day was about her. "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning every word. As we posed for photos, I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, the culmination of years of effort and sacrifice, was about to be overshadowed by something I wasn't prepared for. Something I couldn't yet see. The locker room door caught my eye from across the gym, slightly ajar. My gaze lingered there for a moment, but I dismissed it. This was Emily's day, and I refused to let my suspicions ruin it. For now, the ceremony hadn't started yet, and the gymnasium was abuzz with chatter and laughter. Parents exchanged pleasantries, students posed for photos, and faculty members made last-minute adjustments to the program. Monica was still nowhere to be seen, though I wasn't surprised. She had a knack for disappearing into the crowd when I needed her the most. I leaned against the back wall, sipping from a water bottle, my eyes scanning the room out of habit. Emily stood at the center of a group of her friends, her laughter filling the air. She was in her element, and I felt a swell of pride again, momentarily pushing my unis to the background. Then I saw him, Mr. Donovan. Tall, charismatic, and too familiar for my liking. His smile was wide, his handshake firm as he greeted parents and students alike. I'd only seen him in passing before, but Monica's frequent mentions had etched his face into my mind. The way he moved, the ease with which he commanded attention, it all seemed too polished. "Hey, Dad." Emily's voice broke my train of thought as she bounded over to me. "I want you to meet Mr. Donovan. He's been such an amazing mentor this year." Before I could object, she was already waving him over. My jaw tightened as he approached, his stride confident. He greeted Emily warmly, then turned to me with an extended hand. "Mr. Grant," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "Emily's told me so much about you." I shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip. "Good things, I hope," I said, my tone neutral. Good things," he replied with a chuckle. "You've raised an exceptional daughter, Ba." The compliment should have disarmed me, but it didn't. His eyes flicked briefly toward the crowd, as if searching for someone. I followed his gaze instinctively, and there she was. Monica. She stood near the refreshment table, her back to us, engaged in what seemed like an animated conversation with another parent. But it was fleeting, the way his eyes lingered on her before snapping back to me. Something inside me shifted. A suspicion I'd been suppressing for months suddenly roared to life. "So, Mr. Donovan," I said, keeping my voice casual, Emily's mentioned how much she's enjoyed your classes. What's next for you after graduation? He smiled, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Oh, just the usual, preparing for next year, helping students with recommendations, things like that. Emily chimed in, oblivious to the tension I felt. He's been so great, Dad. I'm going to miss his classes so much. Sounds like you've been busy, I said, holding his gaze. He didn't flinch, but there was a moment, a fraction of a second, where I caught something in his expression. Guilt? Unease? I couldn't tell, but it was enough to make my skin crawl. Well, he said, turning his attention back to Emily, I should get back to helping with the setup. It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Grant. He excused himself, disappearing into the crowd. I turned to Emily, masking my unease with a smile. He seems passionate about teaching. She beamed, clearly not noticing the edge in my voice. He's the best. As she wandered off to rejoin her friends, I couldn't shake the image of Donovan's fleeting glance at Monica. It wasn't overt, but it wasn't innocent either. Minutes passed, and Monica finally returned, her face flushed from exertion, or something else. Where've you been? I asked, keeping my tone light. Oh, just mingling, she said, waving a dismissive hand. You know how these things are. I nodded, studying her carefully. Her hair was slightly out of place, her lipstick faintly smudged. Details I might not have noticed on another day. But today they screamed at me. Everything okay? She asked, tilting her head, her voice just a touch too casual. Fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just soaking it all in. But the knot in my stomach was growing tighter. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was certain now that something was there. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. The locker room door caught my attention again, still slightly ajar. I told myself it was nothing, just a storage area for sports equipment, but my feet were already moving toward it, my curiosity overpowering my better judgment. Behind me, Monica called out, "Where are you going?" "Just need a minute," I said, not looking back. As I reached the door, the hum of voices in the gym faded into the background. My hand hovered over the handle, my pulse quickening. Whatever lay behind this door, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But I couldn't turn back now. My hand trembled slightly as it gripped the cold metal handle of the locker room door. I paused, listening to the muffled voices from the gym, a stark contrast to the silence behind this door. My heart thudded in my chest, the kind of rhythmic pounding that drowns out reason and amplifies instinct. I pulled the door open slowly, just enough to peer inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting their harsh glow over rows of lockers and benches. At first glance, the room seemed empty, save for the faint echo of footsteps retreating deeper into the space. The rational part of me begged to stop. This is nothing. You're overthinking it. Turn around, go back to the ceremony, and let this go. But the knot in my stomach tightened. I stepped inside, letting the door close softly behind me. The faint scent of cologne mingled with the metallic tang of locker doors. It was out of place, too refined for a room like this. My eyes darted around, scanning the shadows between the rows of lockers. Then I heard it, a hushed laugh, soft, almost playful. It stopped me cold. I moved toward the sound, my footsteps careful, deliberate. My palms were clammy, my breathing shallow. The laughter came again, followed by a whispered exchange I couldn't quite make out. But I knew one of the voices. I'd heard it countless times during late-night conversations, during arguments, during vows exchanged years ago. Monica. A surge of emotions gripped me. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, all fighting for dominance. I rounded the corner of a row of lockers and froze. There they were. Monica and Mr. Donovan, huddled close. She leaned against the lockers, her hand brushing his chest, her lips curled into a coy smile I hadn't seen in years. His face was inches from hers, his posture relaxed, confident. My vision narrowed, the world outside of them blurring into irrelevance. Time seemed to slow, every second stretching unbearably. Monica tilted her head, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Their voices were low, intimate. Too intimate. I wanted to storm in, to shout, to demand an explanation, but something held me back. My breath caught as Monica reached up, straightening his tie with a touch that was achingly familiar, yet utterly foreign in this context. "So, what's your excuse today?" she teased, her voice dripping with mock annoyance. Donovan smirked. "Faculty duties, of course. You know, keeping everything polished." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that spoke of shared secrets. I clenched my fists, every muscle in my body coiled tightly. The urge to act was overwhelming, but I forced myself to stay hidden. I needed to see, to hear. I needed proof. Not for anyone else, but for me. Monica glanced toward the door, her smile faltering briefly. We shouldn't linger too long. He's probably looking for me. Donovan shrugged, his confidence unshaken. Let him look. He'll never suspect a thing. You're too good at this. The air left my lungs in a rush, my restraint nearly shattering. Too good at this. How long had this been going on? How many times had they laughed at my expense? Before I could stop myself, I stepped out from behind the lockers, the sound of my shoes on the tile breaking their spell. They both turned sharply, their expressions shifting in an instant. Monica's face drained of color, her hand dropping to her side. Donovan's smirk disappeared, replaced by a flicker of panic. Too good at what exactly? I said, my voice cold, steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the room was suffocating. Monica opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Donovan's eyes darted to the door, as if calculating his chances of escape. I'm waiting, I said, stepping closer, my gaze locked on Monica. Too good at lying. Too good at sneaking around. Or, too good at making a fool out of me. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Donovan finally found his voice, though it was shaky. Mr. Grant, this isn't what it looks like. Shut up. I snapped, my tone razor sharp. He wasn't talking to you. He froze, his face pale. I turned back to Monica, my pulse hammering in my ears. She was still silent, her eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and fear. You always said honesty was the foundation of a good marriage. I said, my voice low but firm. So let's hear it. How long has this been going on? Monica stared at me, her lips trembling as though she was trying to summon words that wouldn't come. Donovan, standing a step behind her, seemed paralyzed, his usual charisma crumbling under the weight of being caught. The locker room felt like it was shrinking, the air thick with the tension of too many unspoken truths. Well, I pressed, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. How long, Monica? Her gaze faltered, dropping to the floor as if the tiles held answers she didn't want to face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. It's not what you think. A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and jagged. Not what I think. Then by all means, enlighten me. What should I think about finding my wife and my daughter's teacher whispering and laughing in a locked room during her graduation? Donovan took a hesitant step forward, raising a hand as if to calm me. Mr. Grant, this is a misunderstanding. Monica and I turned on him with a glare that stopped him mid-sentence. Don't you dare say her name like that. You don't get to talk your way out of this. Monica flinched, her shoulders sagging under the weight of my fury. Ben, please. Don't. I interrupted, my voice firm. Don't say my name. Not until you start telling me the truth. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could see the wheels turning in her head, searching for an explanation that wouldn't sound like a pathetic excuse. But her hesitation spoke louder than any words could. I turned my attention to Donovan. You're a teacher, right? A mentor. Someone who's supposed to be a role model for young minds. Tell me, Mr. Donovan, what exactly does that entail these days? Sneaking around with students' parents. Using a classroom as your personal dating app. His face turned crimson, his composure cracking. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I snapped. And you know it. Monica stepped forward, desperation etched into every line of her face. Ben, stop. This isn't the place. We can talk about this later. Later. I echoed, the word like venom on my tongue. You want to talk later. After what? The ceremony. After the celebratory drinks with parents you've been smiling at while stabbing me in the back. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. I pressed on, my anger boiling over. How many times, Monica? How long have you been humiliating me behind my back while I've been paying for this school, for these parties, for this life you clearly don't respect? Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something, pity perhaps, but it was quickly drowned out by the overwhelming wave of betrayal. Answer me, I demanded. She finally found her voice, though it cracked under the weight of her confession. It started last year, after Emily's junior year. I took a step back, the words hitting me like a physical blow. A year, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. A whole year. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said quickly, the tears spilling over now. It was a mistake. Mistakes don't last a year, I shot back. Accidents don't require careful planning and secrecy. Don't insult me by pretending this was some fleeting lapse in judgment. Donovan shifted uncomfortably, looking like he wanted to disappear. I turned to him, my anger refocusing. And you? What kind of man does this? What kind of man looks a parent in the eye, knowing what he's been doing behind his back? I didn't. He stammered, but I cut him off. Save it. Whatever excuse you're about to give, I don't want to hear it. The door behind me creaked open, and I turned to see Emily standing there, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. Dad, what's going on? Monica's gasp was audible, and Donovan looked like he'd been caught in the act of a crime, which, in a sense, he had. My stomach dropped. This wasn't how Emily was supposed to find out. I straightened, forcing myself to stay calm. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Go back to the ceremony, I'll join you soon. But she didn't move. Her eyes darted between the three of us, suspicion growing. Mum. Mr. Donovan. Why are you both here? Together. Monica opened her mouth, but no words came. I knew I had to say something before Emily's mind jumped to conclusions she wasn't ready for. Your mother and I were having a discussion, I said carefully. It's complicated. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Emily's brow furrowed. Why is Miss R. Donovan part of the discussion? I glanced at Monica, who looked like she was about to break. Donovan stayed silent, his face pale. I turned back to Emily, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Please, Emily. Go back to your friends. This is between us. She hesitated, clearly torn, but finally nodded. Okay, but don't take too long. They're about to start. As the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled heavily, turning back to the two people who had shattered my trust. Consider yourselves lucky she didn't hear more, I said, my voice low but seething. But this conversation isn't over, not by a long shot. The door clicked shut behind Emily, and the silence that followed was deafening. Monica stood frozen, her tears streaking down her face, while Donovan shifted uncomfortably, his hands shoved into his pockets. I ran a hand over my face, trying to process the weight of what I'd just heard. A year. An entire year of lies. The thought clawed at me, each moment they had shared playing out in my mind like a grotesque film reel. My jaw clenched, and I forced myself to speak, my voice low and controlled. This isn't just a mistake, Monica. This is a betrayal. Of me, of Emily, of everything we built together. Her head snapped up, and she opened her mouth as if to protest, but I cut her off. Don't try to twist this into something it's not. You've been lying to me for a year. A year. While I was working, supporting this family, ensuring Emily had the life we dreamed of. And you. I turned to Donovan, my voice sharp. You've been preying on my family like a parasite. He took a step back, his usual smooth demeanor replaced by something much weaker. Fear. Mr. Grant, I swear. It wasn't. Don't finish that sentence. I growled. Because whatever excuse you're about to give, it's not enough. Nothing you say will justify what you've done. Monica finally found her voice, though it was trembling. Ben, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened. It just happened. I repeated, my tone incredulous. You don't accidentally carry on an affair for a year. You don't stumble into secret meetings and stolen moments. This wasn't an accident, Monica. It was a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. She broke into fresh sobs. But I felt no sympathy. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And what about Emily? I continued, my anger bubbling over. Did you think about her while you were sneaking around with her teacher? Did you stop for 1 second to consider what this would do to her? Monica's sobs grew louder, but I didn't relent. You were supposed to be her role model, her mother. And now, when she finds out, and she will find out, you're going to shatter her trust, just like you shattered mine. Donovan finally spoke, his voice weak. Please, Mr. Grant, let's not drag Emily into this. She doesn't need to. Stop talking about my daughter. I snapped, my eyes narrowing. You don't get to decide what's best for her. You lost that right the moment you crossed the line. I stepped closer to him, my fists clenched at my sides. You're done here. Today is the last day you'll set foot in this school. If I see you anywhere near Emily or Monica again, I won't be this calm. His face turned pale, and he nodded quickly. I'll resign after the ceremony. Good, I said, my voice ice cold. And don't think for a second that I won't tell the school board exactly why you're leaving. You're lucky I don't call the police. Monica gasped, stepping forward. Ben, no. Please don't ruin him. He what? I shouted, my patience finally snapping. He means something to you. He's important. Is that it? You still care about him after all of this? Her silence was answer enough. I shook my head, disgusted. Unbelievable. The weight of everything crashed over me. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a betrayal of our family, our future, everything we had built together. I couldn't stay here, not in this room, not with them. I turned toward the door, my hand on the handle before pausing. This isn't over. Not even close. We're going to talk about this when we get home. And you'd better have something more than tears and excuses, Monica, because right now, I don't see a way forward. I didn't wait for her response. I pushed open the door and stepped back into the gym, the noise of the ceremony preparations hitting me like a wave. Parents were laughing, students were chattering, and Emily stood with her friends, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just behind the locker room door. I adjusted my tie, forcing a smile as I approached her. You ready, sweetheart? She beamed, her excitement cutting through the darkness that threatened to consume me. Yeah, Dad. Let's do this. I nodded, pushing everything else to the back of my mind. For now, this was her moment. But later there would be no escaping the reckoning waiting for Monica and Donovan. The ceremony went on as planned. Parents clapped, students posed for pictures, and speeches flowed from the stage. But for me, the world outside my head was muffled, as though I was underwater. I clapped when I was supposed to, smiled when Emily looked my way, and cheered loudly when her name was called. She walked across the stage, radiant, her cap tilted slightly as she accepted her diploma, with a wide grin. That smile was the only thing holding me together. Monica sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She clapped along with the crowd but avoided meeting my eyes. Her movements were mechanical, every motion calculated to appear normal. I couldn't look at her without the memory of the locker room playing on a loop in my mind. Donovan stood to the side of the stage, his face a careful mask of neutrality as he handed diplomas to the students. He avoided glancing in my direction, his usual confidence now replaced with unease. Good. He had every reason to be uncomfortable. When the ceremony ended, parents flooded the courtyard to congratulate their children. Emily ran up to us, her face glowing with pride, and threw her arms around both Monica and me. For a moment, it was easy to forget the chaos simmering beneath the surface. I held onto her tightly, savoring the warmth of her embrace. We're so proud of you, I said, forcing the words out past the lump in my throat. Thanks, Dad, she said, pulling back and adjusting her cap. This is the best day ever. Her words twisted the knife in my chest. Today was supposed to be perfect for her, and I wasn't going to ruin it. Not yet. Let's get some pictures, Monica said, her voice shaky but steady enough to pass for enthusiasm. We took photos in the courtyard, Emily laughing as we posed awkwardly with her friends. I played along, determined to keep up appearances for her sake. Monica's smile in the photos was brittle, and she kept her distance from me. The unspoken tension between us was palpable, but Emily didn't seem to notice. As the crowd began to thin, Emily was swept away by her friends, leaving Monica and me alone for the first time since the locker room. I think I'll head home, Monica said softly, avoiding my gaze. Emily will probably be out celebrating for a while. Not yet, I said, my tone flat. We need to talk. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded. Fine. We walked to the car in silence, the space between us a chasm neither of us dared to cross. The drive home was no better. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. Monica sat rigidly in the passenger seat, her hands clasped in her lap. When we pulled into the driveway, I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, the weight of what's about to happen pressing down on me. Monica opened her door first, stepping out without a word. I followed, locking the car behind us as we entered the house. The air inside was heavy, thick with anticipation and dread. I loosened my tie and turned to face her, my voice cold and even. Sit. She hesitated, then sank into the armchair across from me. Her hands trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I stood over her, arms crossed, the anger I'd held back all day threatening to spill over. "Start talking," I said. "No lies, no excuses. I want the truth, Monica. All of it." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "I've already told you." "You've told me bits and pieces," I interrupted. "I want the whole story. When did it start? How did it happen? And why did you think it was okay to keep doing it for an entire year?" Her lips quivered, but she forced herself to speak. "It started after Emily's junior year. I was volunteering at the school, and Ike's." She broke off, her voice cracking. I felt invisible. "Ben, you were always working late, always distracted." I needed, "I don't know, attention, I guess." "And he was there." I stared at her, my jaw tight. "So, what? Because I was working to provide for this family, you decided you deserved a consolation prize?" "No," she said quickly, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't like that. I wasn't trying to hurt you." "But you did," I said sharply. "You didn't just hurt me, Monica. You betrayed me. You betrayed Emily." She buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled. "I don't know why I did it. I wasn't thinking. It just happened." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "It didn't just happen. You made it happen. Every time you texted him, every time you met him, every time you lied to me. You made a choice." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. "Not yet. I want you to tell Emily," I said, my voice hard. "She deserves to know the truth." Monica's head shot up, her tear-streaked face pale. "No, Ben, please. Don't drag her into this. She's already in it," I said. "She deserves to hear it from you, not from someone else. And if you don't tell her, I will." She stared at me, her eyes wide with panic, but she didn't argue. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "This isn't over," I said, my voice cold. "Not by a long shot." I turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing in the chair. Upstairs, I shut the door to my office, leaned against it, and exhaled shakily. The rage inside me hadn't subsided. But at least now, the stage was set for the next move. The next morning came far too quickly. I hadn't slept. My mind churned endlessly with thoughts of what had happened and what was yet to come. Monica had stayed downstairs all night, her presence a ghostly weight in the house. Emily, blissfully unaware, had come home late, her laughter echoing as she recounted the evening's celebrations to herself before heading to bed. But today wouldn't be like last night. Today was the day Emily would learn the truth. She deserved to know, even if it shattered her. I made my way downstairs, the tension in the air thicker than the scent of the coffee Monica had brewed. She sat at the kitchen table, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen from crying. She didn't look up as I entered the room. "She's still asleep," Monica said quietly, her voice hoarse. "Can't we wait? Just give her some time." I slammed my hand down on the counter, the sound startling her. "You had a year of time, Monica. A year to make a different choice, to stop this. No more waiting." Her shoulders sagged, and she nodded mutely. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter taste doing little to clear the bile rising in my throat. Emily's footsteps sounded on the stairs, her voice chipper as she greeted us. "Morning, guys. Big day, huh?" I forced a smile, trying to hold myself together. "Morning, sweetheart. Sit down. We need to talk." Her brows furrowed as she looked between us, sensing the seriousness in my tone. She pulled out a chair, her gaze flicking to Monica, who couldn't meet her eyes. "What's going on?" Emily asked, her voice cautious. I hesitated, glancing at Monica. "Your mother has something to tell you." Emily's confusion deepened as she looked at Monica, waiting. When silence stretched too long, I spoke again, sharper this time. "Monica." Monica's hands trembled as she wrung them together, tears brimming in her eyes. "Emily, honey, I've made a terrible mistake." Emily blinked, her confusion morphing into worry. "What kind of mistake?" Monica's voice broke. "I've been having an affair." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emily's face contorted with shock and disbelief. "What?" she whispered. "What are you talking about?" Monica reached for her, but Emily recoiled. "With who?" she demanded, her voice rising. Monica hesitated, and I answered for her. "With Mr. Donovan, your teacher." But Emily's eyes widened, her face going pale. No, that's not true." She turned to me, searching for reassurance. "Dad, tell me she's lying, please." I shook my head, my heart breaking as I saw the devastation in her eyes. "I wish I could." Emily pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. You're kidding me. This has to be a joke. Mom, tell me this isn't real. It's real, Monica said, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry, Emily. I never meant for you to find out like this. Emily's hands balled into fists, her voice trembling with anger. You never meant for me to find out. That's what you're sorry for. Not for doing it, but for getting caught. Emily. Monica started, but Emily cut her off. Don't. Tears streamed down her face now, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. You cheated on Dad. With my teacher. Do you have any idea what you've done? What this means for us? For me? I do, Monica said, her voice cracking. And I'll do anything to fix it. But Emily let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow. Fix it? How do you fix something like this? I stepped forward, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder, but she shrugged me off. I don't even know who you are, she said, her voice breaking as she turned to Monica. How could you do this to us? Monica sobbed, her hands covering her face, but Emily didn't wait for an answer. She stormed out of the kitchen, the sound of the front door slamming behind her reverberating through the house. Monica collapsed into the chair, her sobs echoing in the silence. I stood there, torn between chasing after Emily and leaving Monica to wallow in the mess she'd created. Now you see, I said coldly. Now you see the damage you've done. I didn't mean to hurt her, Monica choked out. But you did, I said. And now you have to live with it. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I'll find her. But don't think this absolves you, Monica. Not by a long shot. As I stepped outside, the cool morning air hit me, and I scanned the street for Emily. My heart ached for her, for the pain she was going through. But I knew this was just the beginning. The unraveling of our family was far from over. I found Emily sitting on the curb at the end of our street, her knees pulled to her chest, her face buried in her hands. The sight of her, so small and vulnerable, shattered whatever composure I had left. She didn't look up as I approached, but the tension in her shoulders told me she knew I was there. I sat down beside her, leaving a small gap between us. We sat in silence for a while, the distant hum of traffic filling the void. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Emily's voice was raw, each word heavy with hurt. I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. I didn't know for sure until yesterday. I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't have proof. She finally looked up, her tear-streaked face a mixture of anger and betrayal. And now you do. Did you catch them, together? Her words hung in the air, and I felt my stomach twist. Yes, I said quietly. In the locker room during the ceremony. Her expression crumbled and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. At my graduation, she whispered, her voice cracking. She couldn't even wait until after my graduation. I wanted to reach out, to pull her into a hug, but I knew she wasn't ready for that. Emily, this isn't your fault. None of this is on you. Isn't it? She snapped, her voice sharp. She wouldn't have met him if it weren't for me. He's my teacher. She used me to get close to him. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. Monica's betrayal was multi-layered, each one more cruel than the last. You're not responsible for her choices, I said firmly. What she did is on her, not you. And you have every right to feel angry, to feel betrayed. Emily wiped at her face angrily. What are we going to do now? I hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on me. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I do know this, we're going to get through it. You and me. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. What about her? Are you going to stay with her? The question hit me like a freight train. The truth was, I hadn't made that decision yet. A part of me wanted to throw Monica out and never look back, but another part of me, smaller, quieter, wondered if there was anything left worth saving. I don't know, I said honestly. But right now, my focus is on you, on making sure you're okay. She stared at me for a moment before nodding, a small flicker of relief passing over her face. Okay. We sat there for a little longer, the silence between us less heavy now. Finally, I stood, extending a hand to her. Come on, let's go home. She hesitated before taking my hand, letting me pull her to her feet. Together, we walked back to the house, each step feeling like an eternity. When we stepped inside, Monica was still sitting at the kitchen table, her face buried in her hands. She looked up as we entered, her eyes red and swollen. Emily. Don't. Emily said, her voice ice cold. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Monica flinched but didn't argue. Emily brushed past her, heading upstairs without another word. I stood there for a moment, watching as Monica's shoulders slumped further. I don't know if she'll ever forgive you, I said, my voice low. And honestly, I don't know if I will either. Monica nodded, her face crumpling again. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. To make it right. I shook my head. You can't fix this. Monica, there's no going back from what you've done. She broke into sobs again, but I didn't stay to watch. I followed Emily upstairs, knocking gently on her bedroom door. When she didn't answer, I opened it slowly, finding her curled up on her bed, clutching a pillow. Can I stay? I asked softly. She nodded, her face buried in the pillow. I sat down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I'm here, I said, for whatever you need. She didn't respond, but she didn't push me away either. For now, that was enough. The house was quieter than it had ever been. Emily stayed locked in her room, emerging only for meals, her eyes puffy and her responses clipped. Monica moved like a ghost, avoiding both of us, her presence an unwelcome reminder of the wreckage she'd left in her wake. And me? I existed in the spaces between, juggling my own rage and the need to be strong for my daughter. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Monica approached me in the living room. She hesitated in the doorway, her hands nervously gripping the hem of her sweater. I didn't look up, keeping my eyes on the muted TV. Ben, she started, her voice trembling, need to talk. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms. Go ahead, talk. She stepped into the room, her movements slow, deliberate. I know there's nothing I can say to undo what I've done, but I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Of course, it wasn't about me. It was about you and whatever void you were trying to fill. But here's the thing, Monica. It became about me when you decided to destroy the life we built together. It became about Emily when you dragged her into this by betraying her trust. You didn't just hurt yourself, Monica. You shattered this family. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know, and I hate myself for it. I can't believe I was so selfish. I stood abruptly, the anger I'd been suppressing all day boiling to the surface. Selfish doesn't even begin to cover it. You didn't just cheat on me. You cheated on us. You cheated on every promise you made, every sacrifice I made to give you and Emily the life you wanted. She sobbed, but I pressed on, the words spilling out like a dam had broken. Do you even realize the position you've put Emily in? Her teacher, Monica, the man who was supposed to guide and mentor her, you turned someone she admired into a symbol of everything wrong with this family. Monica sank into the couch, her head in her hands. I'll do anything, Ben. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes to make this right. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice cold. There's no making this right. There's no going back to the way things were. You can't unring this bell. She looked up at me, desperation etched into every line of her face. So, what happens now? Are you just done? Are we done? I paused, the question hanging in the air. The truth was, I didn't have an answer, not yet. The anger inside me burned so brightly it was hard to see past it. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This isn't just about me, I said. Emily comes first. Until she's okay, nothing else matters. Monica nodded, her tears falling silently. I'll do whatever it takes to earn her forgiveness. I scoffed, shaking my head. Good luck, because right now, I don't think she even wants to look at you, let alone hear what you have to say. I left her sitting there, her sobs echoing in the empty room. Upstairs, I checked on Emily, peeking into her room to find her curled up in bed, her headphones on. I closed the door softly, my heart heavy. Back in my office, I sat in the dark, the events of the past few days replaying in my mind. Monica's betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a series of choices that had unraveled everything we had built. The trust, the love, the stability. It was all gone. And yet, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, what next? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not for me, not for Emily, and certainly not for Monica. Tomorrow, I would make a decision. One that would determine the future for all of us. Morning light streamed through the windows, painting the living room in soft hues of gold. The quiet was deceptive, the kind of calm that sits just before a storm. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. I had spent the night weighing the options, replaying every word, every tear, every betrayal. And now, it was time to act. Emily emerged first, her eyes still red but her face set with quiet determination. She poured herself some cereal without a word, sitting at the opposite end of the table. She didn't look at me, but her presence was enough to remind me of what mattered most. Monica came down moments later, her steps hesitant. She paused in the doorway, her eyes darting between us, searching for a cue. Neither of us gave her one. "I think we all need to talk," I said finally, breaking the heavy silence. Emily glanced up, her expression cold. "I have nothing to say to her." Monica flinched, but I raised a hand. "Emily, please. Just for a few minutes." She sighed heavily, crossing her arms but staying in her seat. Monica took the chair at the far end of the table as far from Emily as she could manage. For a moment, none of us spoke, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us. "I've made a decision," I said at last, my voice steady. "This family can't stay like this. The lies, the anger, the broken trust. It's too much. For all of us." Emily's brow furrowed, her posture stiffening. Monica's eyes filled with fresh tears, but I held up a hand to stop her from speaking. "Monica," I said, turning to her, "you've made your choices. And now I'm making mine. I'm filing for divorce." Her face crumpled, and she let out a small, strangled sob. "Ben, please. I've already spoken to a lawyer," I continued, cutting her off. "This isn't negotiable. What you did wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of Emily, of everything we built together. There's no coming back from that." Emily let out a small gasp, her eyes wide. "Mean, you're really ending it?" I turned to her, my expression softening. "I'm doing this for us, Emily. For you. We deserve better than this." Monica sobbed openly now, her hands clutching at the edge of the table. "I'll do anything, Ben. Therapy, counseling, anything to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "This isn't something you can patch up with apologies and promises. You made your choices, Monica. Now you have to live with them." Emily spoke then, her voice cold. "You're lucky he's even talking to you after what you did. I don't think I ever want to." "Bah, Emily." Monica started, but Emily stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "No," she shouted, her voice trembling with anger. "You don't get to talk to me. You don't get to pretend like you care about me after everything you've done. You were supposed to protect me, to protect this family, and instead, you destroyed it." Monica buried her face in her hands, her sobs shaking her shoulders. Emily stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing on the stairs. I watched her go, my chest tight with both pride and sorrow. Monica looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "What happens now?" she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, the exhaustion of the past days settling over me like a weight. "Now, we move forward. Separately. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Emily is okay. But you need to figure out who you are without us. Without me." She nodded, her tears falling silently. "I'll leave," she said finally, her voice broken. "I'll pack my things and go." "That's probably best," I said quietly. "Emily and I need time. Time to heal." She rose from the table, moving slowly, like a woman carrying the weight of her own destruction. As she walked out of the room, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't how I had envisioned my life, my family. But it was the only path forward. Later, Emily came back downstairs, her face still streaked with tears. She sat beside me, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for putting me first." I wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "Always, sweetheart. Always." The future was uncertain, the road ahead full of challenges. But for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. We would rebuild, piece by piece, step by step. And while the scars of Monica's betrayal would never fully fade, they wouldn't define us. We were stronger than that.